Okay. Today we are having a series of, I think it is 4 listening sessions to review different sections of the draft manual of operations for the restructuring of the presbytery. This, of course, is listening session number 1. The sessions that we're going to be reviewing today are the Constitutional Ministries Committee and the Justice and Mercy Commission. Oops, went too far. Okay, who are we? The table of contents, I just wanted to review this since this is the first listening session. I'm assuming that everyone has had the opportunity to get a copy of the draft manual and to at least glance at it. The way this is structured, there are basically 5 main parts of this. The first section is who are we and what are we called to do? And it includes our statement of identity and purpose, where do we operate geographically, and an overview of the structure. The second section is how do we carry out our identity and purpose, which includes a description of the presbytery, description of the commissions, and of the committees. We may see some changes here. We kind of had a curveball thrown at us as we were trying to finalize this document, which included changes to the coordinating cabinet, and it's going to have to operate as the board of directors of the corporation. And so that may end up being a commission. But the way the manual is set up right now, it has 4 different commissions: the Church Partnership Commission, the Pastoral Leadership Commission, the Justice and Mercy Commission, and the Commission on Administration. And then it's got 2 committees, the Constitutional Ministries Committee and the Coordinating Cabinet, which, as I said, the Coordinating Cabinet may end up being a commission in the final version. The third section is other structures, which includes Presbyterian Women and the Black Caucus, which are not, don't fall under the other structures or the previously named structures. And then the fourth section will be the operating policies and procedures. And if you look in the draft manual, that is pretty much blank at the moment, but that will include things like standard procedure for conducting meetings and personnel policies and anything that we need to know to be able to run the presbytery. And that will be filled out by the commissions and committees and staff. And then the 5th section is just a description of how we can amend the manual. And so today, we're going to look at the Justice and Mercy Commission and the Constitutional Ministries Committee. I don't know what the best way is to work this. If you have questions, the purpose of this meeting is so that we can field questions or suggestions and then try and incorporate them into the draft of the manual that we will present to the presbytery for amendment and adoption. So we could you could either post them to the chat, or you could go ahead and interrupt me, I guess, or save them till the end. Okay, the Constitutional Ministries Committee. I'm going to go with this one first. I think it's more cut and dried. So in the first section, who are we and what are we called to do under the structure overview committees? The Constitutional Ministries Committee says that the presbytery is responsible for fulfilling duties contained in the Book of Order and to matters that pertain to both the Synod and the General Assembly. The CMC will maintain the committees and commissions required by the Constitution, such as the Permanent Judicial Commission and Committee on Representation, and maintain required processes and procedures concerning sexual misconduct. It will receive communications from the higher councils of the church and lead the presbytery in appropriate responses. This description here and for each of these in this section is pretty much taken directly from our mission statement, the Way Forward document. Mindful of the Presbytery's fundamental commitment to inclusion and representation in all the councils of the church, the CMC shall develop appropriate means of drawing leaders into the Presbytery's ministries and the higher councils of the PCUSA, nominating individuals to serve on commissions and committees and as officers of the Presbytery. Okay, the second section is how do we carry out our identity and purpose. This is where we really get into the meat of the committee. Under the Constitutional Ministries Committee, scope of responsibilities. We have bills and overtures, provide guidance to the Presbytery related to overtures to and from the General Assembly and the Synod. Sexual misconduct and child and youth protection. Fulfill all the responsibilities set forth in the Presbytery of the Peak Statement, policy and procedures on sexual misconduct and child and youth protection. The Permanent Judicial Commission, the PJC. Permanent Judicial Commission shall fulfill all the responsibilities and have all powers as set forth in with the Book of Orders, section D-5.0000. The PJC chair shall be represented on the CMC, but the PJC is not under the authority of the CMC, but is a commission of the Presbytery. The PJC shall be elected by the nomination and representation subcommittee of the CMC and will have 3 classes of 3 people each. Still under scope of responsibilities, investigating prosecuting committees. Investigating committees, IC, and prosecuting committees, PC, shall fulfill all of the responsibilities set forth in and in accordance with the Book of Order D-5.0000. When an inquiry by an investigating committee into an alleged offense of a non-sexual nature is mandated, the Presbytery moderator, the stated clerk, and the chair of the Committee on Ministry shall appoint 3 to 5 persons to serve in that capacity. The investigative committee.
You just got to put your headphone on when you go downstairs.
Could I ask everyone to mute yourselves unless you have something to say to the group? That will make things a little bit easier for all of us. Okay, so they shall appoint 3 to 5 persons to serve in that capacity in accordance with the Book of Order D-10.0200. That capacity being an investigating committee. When an inquiry by an investigating committee into an alleged offense of a sexual nature or involving a child or youth is mandated, the investigating committee shall be selected from the IC pool in accordance with the Presbytery of the Peak sexual misconduct policy. And investigating and prosecuting committees are represented on, but not under the authority of the CMC. Scope of responsibilities continued. This committee also has administrative review of sessions to fulfill responsibilities set forth in G-3.0108A to conduct annual session records review and any special administrative review as needed. Representation and nomination to fulfill all the responsibilities for participation and representation set forth in the Book of Order G-3.0103, reporting at least annually to the Presbytery and ensure that all offices, commissioners, higher councils, committees, commissions, and boards of the Presbytery are fully staffed in accordance with this manual. This is one area I will mention that we are deviating a little bit from doing things decently and in order, because the Book of Order says that the Committee on Representation shall not be a subcommittee, or it has to be its own entity. And we are actually putting that responsibility under the CMC because it is mandated by the CMC. So we will see how that plays out in the final version. And last, I think this is last, is ecclesial partnerships. The committee will oversee presbyteries' relationships with higher councils of the church, other presbyteries, and other organizations. Okay, the membership and staff liaison for the Constitutional Ministries Committee. The stated clerk shall act as liaison to the CMC. It will have 3 classes of 3. Members of subcommittees other than the chair need not be members of the CMC. Membership is formed in consultation with the Nominating and Representation Subcommittee of CMC. Leadership, the chair shall be elected by the presbytery. Secretary, if any, may be elected by the CMC. Subcommittee chairs, if any, may be elected by the CMC other than the Permanent Judicial Commission. Meetings and quorum. Quorum shall be 50% of members on the CMC. I think this will, in the final version, say more than 50% of members on the CMC, rather than 50%. If there's an even number on the committee, then that does not work as well as we would like. So it should say more than 50%. Meetings shall be at least quarterly and may take place electronically. Okay, policies and procedures. This will include a checklist of what to include. I think that's really kind of a placeholder that we have in here, but we've kind of fleshed it out a little bit. Nominations and representation will include presbytery officers, committee and commission members, including administrative commissions, assist subcommittee chairs in finding members at their request, commissioners to synod, commissioners to general assembly, other nominations as needed, such as exam readers and so forth, representation, and paid personnel. Policies and procedures for advising presbytery regarding the implementation of principles of unity and diversity, advocate for diversity of leadership, consult with presbytery on the employment of personnel with respect to unity and diversity, child protection policy, and sexual misconduct policy.
Joe?
Yes.
It's Carl Utley. May
Yes,
I ask, under E2H, paid
Yes.
personnel, I don't know what that means. I mean, I
Well,
know who paid personnel are, but I'm not sure what the intent is for nominating committee.
I think it's more on the representation side, Carl. I think that the presbytery has in the past made a statement of intent that we will have representative, how shall I best say this? Diversity
Yeah.
in the administration and in the staff of the presbytery. So I think that is where that is falling in.
Right.
I don't think the nominations committee per se would have any oversight of that, but the representation committee might well. And we haven't really defined exactly how the nominations and representation subcommittees would work here. That would be something that the CMC will flesh out in conjunction with the presbytery as a whole.
Thanks.
Does that answer your question, Carl?
It does. It does.
Okay.
In
Okay.
the final version, you might specify that, because my
Yeah.
first reading was that the nominating committee will nominate paid personnel, and that I think belongs to the Commission on Administration.
Yeah.
Except for
Yes.
called
Yes.
personnel.
Okay. Maybe now would be a good time to ask if there's any questions on the CMC or comments, suggestions. Okay, I will move forward then with the Justice and Mercy Commission. Okay, under section 1, who are we and what are we called to do? Under commissions, again, this is from the Way Forward study, the missions study that was done, finished up over 2 years ago, I guess, and adopted by the presbytery. The Justice and Mercy Commission, the JMC, the purpose of the JMC is to engage and equip the presbytery in its advocacy for justice and in ministries of compassion, such as combating racism, alleviating hunger, or advocating for vulnerable populations. As a commission, the JMC will allocate presbytery mission funds and grants that challenge and enable ministry partners to do together in mission what they cannot do as effectively or faithfully when acting alone. All such actions shall be reported to the presbytery. And now we're in section 2, how do we carry out our identity and purpose, and the scope of responsibilities. We have number 1, engage and equip the presbytery in its advocacy for justice and in ministries of compassion. Included in this is combating racism, alleviating hunger, and advocating for vulnerable populations. That should sound somewhat familiar because we just read it previously. 2, represent the Presbyterian mission work cooperatives with other presbyteries, synod, and the national church. Represent the Presbyterian mission work cooperatives with other mission agencies outside of the PCUSA. Negotiate partnership agreements with mission partners for approval by Presbytery. Recommend the Presbytery affiliate with ecumenical and denominational movements such as the Matthew 25 Initiative. The next section is powers delegated by the Presbytery. So we have allocation of Presbytery mission funds and grants. The commission will receive an authorized allowance annually from the Presbytery's budget. The commission is granted the authority to disperse its annual budget as it sees fit to fulfill the work of the commission. Also, they are empowered to file applications for mission-related grants from outside organizations on behalf of Presbytery. Responsibilities of the commission. 1, mission outreach, things such as the SEDEPCA Mission Group, the South Sudan Presbyterian Mission, et cetera, and others as needed. Disaster relief, coordinate with disaster response organizations, including Presbyterian Disaster Assistance, the PDA, and provide direct disaster relief locally. 3, mission grants. I have procedures for grants are included below in 3HX. I think the X is a placeholder, but this is under the procedures section in, I think it's part 4 of the manual.
Joe, may I jump in and ask a question?
Certainly.
This is Bob Fiedler.
Yes, Bob.
I understand that the manual is still in process and is not complete.
That's correct.
What plans do you have to work on completing this Justice and Mercy session, especially the one you just mentioned? Procedures for grants are included below in 3HX. It's blank. There's no procedures for grants. So is the transformation team going to set procedures for grants, or is there another group that's going to set the procedures?
It is our intention that the Justice and Mercy Commission will develop those procedures, that each of the commissions and committees will develop their own procedures and standards for completing their work. We don't want the transformation team to be dictating how each of these commissions does their work. We want the people that are actually doing the work to work through that themselves.
I think that sounds very good. I think I can speak that the mission committee is much in agreement with the transformation team on that one. For example, the mission committee has a grant process for 2 cents a meal funds. It's been going on for almost 50 years. Community block grants, there's a grant procedure. It's published on the website. So mission committee sees that is a very important way to get congregations involved, grassroots, bottom up for that grant procedure. So we're very comfortable in keeping those grant procedures that are working.
Yes, agreed. And I think that with this new restructuring, there are potentially more, there will potentially be more opportunities for grants. And so this would give each commission, and speaking particularly of the Justice and Mercy Commission, you may be able to expand the types of grants that you're awarding. So that would, you would develop that.
Well, can I ask a question, Joe?
Certainly.
Back under B1, allocation of Presbyterian mission grants, who's going to determine, for instance, who's going to determine how much each commission gets? Last year in the November meeting, we voted a 5 to 7%. And I saw on one thing that somebody had already determined it was going to be 5%. Who is that? Who determines those things?
I'm not sure I'm qualified to answer that, Dusty.
Joe,
Uh,
that kind of goes along with the question I had is, once the policies and procedures are created, because basically we'll be asked to approve this manual prior to the inclusion of all these pieces. So would those policies, such as what she just said, who determines how much they get? Will all of these come back for Presbytery approval as far as grant application procedures and things, or is this outside the scope of Presbytery approval?
Again, I'm not sure how this is going to work out in the end run. We do have that section 5 of this manual, which is how do we amend this document? And the intent behind that, and that is really not fleshed out terribly well at the moment, but the intent there is that we hope that we will not need to go to Presbytery for every change in every policy and procedure in the Presbytery. However, we may need to determine what sorts of changes do need Presbytery approval, Presbytery-wide approval.
I would
So-
think, if I may speak into this, I would think that Presbytery would be the one to actually for allocation, for the annual allocation, that'll be done over the budget process.
I would agree with that, Michael. And part of that budgeting process, much as it is now, I think, involves going back and forth with the commissions to discuss needs and funds available. Would you agree with that, Michael?
I would agree with that because
Yeah.
it comes down to what the budget can bear. That's what it comes down to.
And what the needs are as well.
Yeah.
Well, but just let me say, our Presbytery has, it varies with the market, but we have about 10 to $11 million in our treasure. And so at some point, I hope we'll talk about how we can use that money for God's glory and for God's mission. And I don't ever see that in a chance to talk about that in budgeting.
Well, that's still a budget issue. I mean, that's still a resource for the Presbytery to decide how to use and allocate. And that still comes down to a budget issue. We decide that once a year on Presbytery floor. And that's where it will have to be discussed. I mean, allocation comes down to that. Once a commission, any of these commissions or committees are allocated so much funds, they can use it as their discretion. We're given the power to do that. But the actual budget comes out of the Presbytery's treasury.
But that's my question, Michael. Who determines the allocation? It's who gives you how much you can use?
May I answer
All
that?
Presbytery.
No, I don't.
The Presbytery approved an allocation of the endowment funds at a recent meeting. And those are set out and they're available for the commissions to use to disperse. So that's already been done. It's in our already done business.
But that is a range is what was approved. And I think Dusty's question is more aimed at who's saying whether it's 5 or 7%. And I don't remember whether that was Michael or someone else that said that it is actually Presbytery that votes on that. So it's Presbytery that says this is the amount we're allocating. It is the budget committee and the committee or commission on administration that is going to propose that after consulting with the commissions and committees. But it's ultimately Presbytery that debates that and then votes on it and approves it. And Beth, you have posted in the chat, it does seem as though the Presbytery is addressing how to use more of our funds for the work of the Presbytery.
They did, definitely free up more funding for available use this year than in the previous years, I think. And I think, it may take us a while, but it really does seem to me as though the Presbytery is trying to get away from the hoarding mentality to the ministry mentality. And I've seen that just since I've been here. So kudos to whoever's working behind the scenes to make that happen.
Thank Thank you. And I did want to address one other thing, and I think it was Dusty that said this, that you understood that this was actually a work in progress, and it certainly is by no means complete. And I just wanted to add that actually the transformation team is still meeting on a bi-weekly basis, and we are actually still making changes to this. What I am presenting here is the document that was submitted for Presbytery for the information of the Presbytery. So the actual working copy of this document has some changes from this, but I wanted us all to be on the same page, so I'm using that version that you should be familiar with if you've read it and received it. But it is a work in progress, and it will continue to be a work in progress for possibly in perpetuity.
One more question. Did anyone answer Beth's question? That was a good question about if the commissions make up their procedures, are those going to be accepted by Presbytery, or are they free to make their procedures on their own? Is that right, Beth? Did I get that question right?
Yeah. And I tried to evade that question as much as I possibly could by saying that you know, the section 5 that talks about how this manual gets amended really needs to address that, and what policies and procedures perhaps require Presbytery approval. I can't imagine that the entire Presbytery will need to approve especially every change to every policy and procedure. But there are certain ones that I'm sure will need to have approval.
I made a note of that concern, and we can address that in our transformation team meeting to try to define which things need what approval and how they're approved.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Smith. Okay. Okay, I think we were down to 3 mission grants. Procedure for grants are included below. And then number 4 under responsibilities are hunger action advocacy. 5 is congregational mission partners and networks. 6 is peacemaking. 7 is social justice advocacy. 8 is environmental stewardship and creation care congregations. Membership and staff liaison. Justice, Mercy, and Mission Advocate shall act as liaison to the JMC. I think that we have changed the name of that advocate, but I think that, well, I don't think we've gotten there yet as a team, but I think that has changed now. There will be 3 classes of 3, and members of subcommittees other than the chair need not be members of the JMC. Membership is formed in consultation with the nominating and representation subcommittee of the CMC. Leadership, the chair shall be elected by the Presbytery. Secretary, if any, may be elected by the JMC, and subcommittee chairs, if any, may be elected by the JMC. Meetings and quorum. Here we've proposed that quorum shall be 2/3 of members on the JMC, and the meetings shall be at least quarterly and may take place electronically. We do have a higher level for a quorum on this commission than I think we have on most of the others, perhaps all of the others. And that is something that I suspect will be a topic of debate.
Yeah, Joe, Carl Litley.
Yes, Carl.
As we put the model into practice, just use this as an example. If 9 people turns out to be insufficient a number, if we need 12, for example, by their own judgment, when can that be adapted? Or does that also require a vote of the whole Presbytery?
I think this will go back to my previous evasion of an answer.
Okay.
that I would think that something like that would be something that the Presbytery would have to approve. And I'll also mention that in all of these cases, for each of these listening sessions, where you see that we have put 3 classes of 3, that still needs to be approved by the Presbytery. And, it may be that come November or October or whenever this gets approved, that may be 3 classes of 5, it may be 3 classes of 10, who knows?
Right.
But I consider that as much a placeholder as anything else. We thought that was probably reasonable, but the interested parties might think that is for the most part, I would say that they might be considered to be too low. But yes, if that needs to be changed, I would say that is a change that the Presbytery probably needs to approve, but that should be covered in that section 5.
I think as a general principle, having a 2/3 quorum, probably for every commission, at least when they're using their commission powers.
Here you go.
Because you have 6 people that could make, 6 people have the authority to approve, a couple $100,000 of funding.
Nobody has a couple of $100,000 in the commission budget. Is that correct, Carl?
Well, I'm looking, actually, Bob, when I think about the totality of grants and general budget, I'm sorry, I don't have the document in front of me, but still a significant amount of money.
Sure.
And it just, a higher quorum seems right.
Yes, and of course, that's kind of a balancing act, Carl, as I'm sure you're aware, that, you don't want to hamstring a committee by making the quorum level too high, that it's impossible for them to get that many people together at one time. And that was also, I think, one of the reasons for this commission having the 2/3 was, and not even necessarily for the financial issue, but this commission could take on missions that might be of a more controversial nature, shall I say, when you get into social activism and things like that. And we didn't want, say, 3 people representing the Presbytery in that. And so that's really the thinking behind having this be a higher quorum.
Question? Go.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, Denny.
Yeah, so under 3D1, it mentions the Justice and Mercy and Mission Advocate. The last that I heard, it was is this the new position, the Justice and
Yes.
Mercy? Okay.
Yes, and
so
that's
it's
what I said.
changed-
I'm not sure whether I have the name correct in this version.
Okay,
we'll
that's
be
what I was
correcting the
asking
final,
about,
but
because
that is
last
the
I
new-
heard it was Justice and Mercy Coordinator or something like that.
It's the Justice and Mercy Ministry Specialist.
Yeah. That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay.
thank you.
And
for
then
clarifying.
Beth also had another question in the chat. This question comes from a relatively new member of this Presbytery. Do members of the commission subcommittees need to be Presbytery commissioners or elders, or simply a member of a congregation? I'm certain that they do not need to be Presbytery commissioners. I would say they definitely would need to be a member of a congregation or a minister of the word and sacrament. Whether they need to be elders or not, I don't think we have addressed that in this manual. Smith, do you have anything that you can add to that?
I think, but normally they have been in other committees. But that's something that we may need to address as well.
Joe, in principle, if a commission has authority to act on behalf of the Presbytery, then the membership of that commission has to be comprised of roughly 50-50 of ruling elders and teaching elders.
Yes. I'm in agreement with that. But I think when we're talking about subcommittees, and maybe even the CMC, or, ordinarily we think of elders and ruling elders as being leaders in the church. So it may be desirable to have them be elders, either teaching elders or ruling elders.
I think when you think about, the decisions that are being made, the reason we call elders are to be representatives. So I've seen this happen in other places where just simply to fill spots, they have not made that requirement. But I question whether they could then be really effectively speaking on behalf. They've not been called out by a congregation or whatever. So I don't know, that's just been a bone of contention other places I've been. So I just was curious.
Yeah, and I agree. I think that my personal opinion, and we have not addressed this, but the commission members should be elders.
Right,
ordained
teaching
elders.
and a representation for sure.
Right. The committee members, subcommittee members, I think it's probably desirable that they be elders, but I'm not sure that is necessarily a requirement. But that's something that will have to be addressed. I'm reading Pete Smith's comment. If policies or procedures are to be directly included in the manual, it seems that they would need to be voted on as part of the manual. Any change to the manual should be a vote. If they are created as part of an appendix to the manual, maybe they would not need to be directly approved, but included as information. It is not clear to me the intent here, not intending to hash this out here and now, just offering the thoughts. I think that's an excellent point. And that is kind of our thinking, that we could have an appendix that would not necessarily be require presbytery approval for every change. Okay, but we'll make note of that. George Anderson says, I have a reflection about overall wording when appropriate. So you can, George, take the floor.
I don't know if it's appropriate now. We seem to be in the weeds, helpfully so. I don't mean that disparagingly. Helpfully so. So I don't mean to lift back up, but just for reflection before it gets finalized. I mean, I serve a very purple church. I wonder about those who feeling that they're part of a presbytery who don't necessarily match up with what this overall document is saying with the Justice and Mercy Commission. For instance, the overall language, combating racism, alleviating hunger, and advocating for vulnerable possibilities. We are in kind of an era of like social justice advocacy as moving away from actual mission work. And for instance, alleviating hunger. Well, what about homelessness, illiteracy, the need of counseling and, school bullying or whatever? Why that one? That one, obviously, the answer to that question is we're in post George Floyd and it's in a priority, but it could date the document if we're going to be so specific about only one thing that has to do with mission, and the other two are about, about advocacy. Also, what's missing from the document is any mention of like evangelism. And I looked through the whole document, I can't find it anywhere else. But for those who are concerned about starting new churches, about, not popular with everybody, but, just in terms of like, evangelism, what has been known in the past, that's missing. And so just overall, I worry about us becoming a polarized nation, and I worry about the presbytery becoming a siloed presbytery, and also looking like it kind of is basically, I'm not being very articulate. I could if I had more time, but basically maybe standing with the progressive wing as if there's no place for those who have those other concerns that, we're graduating, seminaries, we're graduating, they're having a hard time filling churches in red zones. And I don't tend to vote that way myself, but and I'm wondering about the presbytery, if we feel like we have a space for those churches that just don't line up with the people who wrote the document.
George, if I may jump in there, because I've used some of the language too. I think we're being too specific, such as if you go up there, we list SEDEPTA. Well, what happens in 2 years from now, if SEDEPTA should just collapse? I know it's been going on for decades, but being a little bit too specific, you need to be a little bit more general. And because this is a manual operation, this is not detailed operation. This is how we do the business. And I think we definitely being a little bit too specific and leaving open some gray areas.
Okay, let me respond to George's comment. And I'll tell you why those particular things are in this document is because they were specifically mentioned in the Way Forward mission study that was approved by the Presbytery. So, and I'm not sure about SEDEPTA, Michael, but those sorts of things were put in there as typical examples, but not necessarily mandates, I'll say. And certainly they could be removed at a later time if they are no longer
These would
apply.
be, my feeling, these would be items would be great to put in an appendix. You could say examples of operations in appendix, whatever, that could be changed. Okay, but in the document itself, since this in a lot of ways should be considered our, I want to use the word Bible, but this is what we're going to go refer back to as to what our procedures are.
Okay. I'm going to move forward and we can come back to that. I'm sorry, did somebody say something?
Mr. Smith, I've got that noted for us to
Okay.
be sure we address in the transportation thing.
Yeah. Very good. Okay, I don't have many more slides, I don't think here, so we'll get through this and then we can talk some more. Policies and procedures. Checklist of what to include. Okay, so again, those are to be fleshed out yet. So that concludes the presentation on those two sections of the manual. I did want to include in here the schedule for review and adoption of the manual as I understand it here. We have 4 listening sessions, all on Tuesdays at 12 noon via Zoom. Today's was on Constitutional Ministries Committee and Justice and Mercy Commission. September 6th was the Pastoral Leadership Commission. September 13th is the Church Partnership Commission, and then September 27th is the Commission on Administration and Coordinating Cabinet. And that last one is the one that the team still has the most work to do, and we are actually hopeful that we can meet with the Presbytery's attorney to discuss some of the legal ramifications concerning the cabinet and the Commission on Administration and the way they interact with each other. Okay, I see Pete Smith has said evangelism is B1, B2, which I didn't have that exact reference in front of me, but I think that it is addressed there under church development, I think is where that is. Okay.
B1, B2, where's that?
Page 7, Pete says in the chat. B1, B2, page 7.
I don't, oh, evangelist, yeah. Okay.
Okay, so then we are planning on having a called Presbytery meeting to review the draft manual, consider amendments, and then possibly consider adoption. Is the way I understand the way we're calling the meeting at this time. It is likely that we would not adopt it at that time, in my opinion, but perhaps we would. And that will be Saturday, October the 22nd via Zoom. I believe it's via Zoom. Carl, you can correct me if I'm wrong there. And then the Stated Presbytery meeting is on Thursday, November 17th, to consider amendments and adoption if not completed during the October 22nd called meeting. And I think that the plan right now, with fingers crossed, is that that would be an in-person meeting, but I'm not, that is subject to change, and I'm not sure that's set yet.
With regard to Zoom or in person, we polled the cabinet. The cabinet is evenly split about whether it should be Zoom or in person. And I don't think it's just about the pandemic. I think people have seen what's possible doing a meeting on Zoom in terms of saving time and so forth. We've had quite a few people say we should have a hybrid meeting. And there are a couple of things about a hybrid meeting. One, the feedback I read from other presbyteries is the sense that hybrid meetings create two different experiences. Of the presbytery meeting itself tends to privilege those who are in person. On the technological side, we have to remember that we have, what do we call them, deserts, broadband deserts in our presbytery, where people don't have access in the same way that those of us, for example, living in Roanoke. There's also the problem or the challenge of voting. If you think about the fundamentals of Presbyterian polity, is we make motions and we make proposals, we debate, and then we vote. And every person in the meeting has to have equal access to listening, to speaking, and then finally, each person needs to have access to a voting mechanism. And again, those are just technical challenges we're trying to learn about.
Okay, thank you for that, Carl. We will leave that to the cabinet to determine what state these will be. But rather than get into the weeds with that issue here, we'll get into the weeds on the document itself. Thank you for that. And I think, let me see. I think that's the end of my presentation. So I'm going to stop sharing and we will open the floor to any other comments, questions, suggestions.
Excuse me. Pardon me. Yeah, I got a question.
Yeah, fire away, Michael.
Okay, if we get down to the end of the planned listen sessions, and we need more time, we're going to schedule more. Did you understand the question?
I did. I was hoping somebody else would answer it, but to me, the answer would be obvious, or at least by a called Presbytery meeting, it should be obvious whether we are ready or whether we are not. So
And
if we don't have, let me say this, if we don't have more listening sessions, then that called meeting will not be a very productive meeting, perhaps.
okay, also, next question is this, and this going back to Carl. If we have a Zoom meeting for the review of this and possible adoption, would that be legit, or we still need to be in person for it to be a legitimate meeting or an authoritative meeting of Presbytery? Trying to find the right words.
Yeah, this is maybe a question for our stated clerk, but we are currently operating somewhat outside of the bounds of but because of necessity, the plan is to ratify this meetings virtually at the first opportunity once we are back to meeting in person. But I think that we are considering that would be does that answer your question, Michael?
Well, I'm just putting it out there because it's the things we thought about.
Right. The legal constitutional answer, I think the clerk would agree, until we meet in person, everything is out of the ordinary. When we meet in person for the first time, we will have to ratify everything we've done and give the presbytery, we give ourselves permission to meet on online. That's what we hear from the Office of the Stated Clerk.
Okay, Beth has put in the chat, in these two commissions, what is the overall net loss or gain in participation based on the same responsibilities previously? I do not have an answer for that. I know that we, as we were putting what I previously said were kind of placeholders in terms of membership, we did consider what the current makeup was of the committees that are being replaced by these commissions. And actually, I guess I should correct you, but Beth, one of these is a committee and one is a commission. We're
Right,
talking
I did
about-
think about that afterwards. But in any
But that's
case,
okay. It's the spirit that is important here. And I think that part of these listening sessions is so that stakeholders like Bob Fiedler is here today for the what will be the Justice and Mercy Commission and the Mission Committee. You know, certainly they would have the opportunity to weigh in on what the makeup is. We have really pretty much left the creation of subcommittees for the most part to the commissions and committees, and how many folks will be on them. That is all indeterminate at this time, and that will be up to the commissions and committees themselves to determine how best to staff their needs there. So really what the Presbytery will vote on is the members of the commissions.
I hope that I don't think an intended consequence of shifting the way we do that we work together is to make even one less person active in the presbytery who feels called to it. I was working in particular on the Pastoral Leadership Commission membership, and there are actually 51 people involved in the antecedent committees. And to go from 51 to 9 may be too severe. As I was working it, it'd be like 27. So, but I don't want to, if anybody wants to be engaged and active in the presbytery, let's not prevent them. We ought to make it easy for people to participate, not vice versa.
Yeah, and I think that the subcommittee area there is where the big heavy lifting will be done, and we don't want to have 51 people on a commission, obviously, and certainly if you then have a quorum of over 50% or 2/3, you'd never be able to do anything. So I think the idea is to keep the commissions as small as practicable, and then flesh out the work with committees, subcommittees of the commissions.
Gotcha.
Beth, you said there was something you were hoping to hear, and I'm not sure whether that was Carl's answer or mine, but and you are muted at the moment. So, okay. And Smith has mentioned that we and the transformation team are available to listen via email as well following this. So, Smith, I don't know that we have a published listing of the members of the transformation team along with email, but I don't know what the best way is to disseminate that information.
I think we'll have everybody's email from this meeting, and we can do that today, and then make clear who's on the committee through Peaks postings.
And they could also go through the presbytery offices, I'm sure. I suspect that Julie won't be feel too overly burdened by forwarding questions or comments to us. And she knows how to get a hold of us.
Smith,
Anything?
Joe has set a very high bar for moderating. this meeting.
He certainly has, and I've got to, work hard for the next week to get ready.
The
Thank you,
the only reason I volunteered to do this first one was because I think it's a whole lot simpler than the ones to come, so.
I think, has everyone had opportunity? I'm supposed to be in another meeting now, but we'll stay on as long as we need to.
I have 2 minutes left in our allotted time, according to 1 clock, so. Which may or may not be correct. Okay, well, hearing no other comments or questions, why don't I close this with a word of prayer? Let's bow our heads. Dear Lord, we thank you for the opportunity to meet together, even if it's via Zoom, and to have thoughtful, considered conversations as we try and determine what your will is for this presbytery and for each of us in the coming days, weeks, months, and years. We ask you to continue to fill our hearts and minds with your Holy Spirit, that we might actively seek to do your will. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you all for coming. Smith, did you save the chat? There's a way to do that, I think.
I was trying to figure out how to do it, and I haven't gotten there yet.
Okay.
Carl, do you know, will it be recorded since the meeting was being recorded?
It is recorded, yeah.
The meeting has been recorded. I assume chat gets recorded in there too, but don't close the meeting until I have a chance to explore that question, okay?
I'll check with my Zoom.
I know there's a way to do it, so. Okay, I have copied that into a Word document, Carl, so
Oh, great. Thank you.
and I'll forward that to you.
So you've got it then.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you, Joe.
okay. Thank you all for coming, whoever's left here.
Thank you, Joe. And
See you
everybody.
perhaps in a week, or, yeah. Okay, bye now.